Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you are doing well and taking care of those closest to you. I hope you're getting ready. Your plans for Thanksgiving are coming together seamlessly, and that everybody knows what dish they're making and or bringing. And I hope you have an excellent, light and breezy conversation at the table itself. You get to spend some quality time with some quality people. I'm looking forward to my wife's cornbread and sausage stuffing, which is absolutely delightful, and for our World Cup that will be taking place in the holidays this year, because it is too hot in Qatar to play soccer in the summer. So looking forward to that as well. And I am especially excited to share today's episode with you. My guest on the show today is YouTuber Finn Mckenty, who you might know from the YouTube channel The Punk Rock MBA. He is a guy that I became aware of a few years ago because he would do these videos that would reverse engineer how certain bands got as big as they did, and he would pepper in this great musical analysis and these like little mini documentaries about different scenes and styles of like alternative and punk rock music, running the whole gambit of metal, as I'm sure any fans might know. And he would have those, as well as very insightful practical advice on marketing, promotion, and personal growth, which I enjoyed as well. And as someone who's teaching themselves the business side of being a creative later on in life, I found it a source of invaluable advice, not just in a way of configuring my mind to think about promotion, but as well as like how to approach various social media platforms and such. So been a fan for a while, and I was excited to get to chat with Finn because I think I thought that I could learn a lot, and I learned a lot from this conversation. And especially, it was cool to be able to get to chat with him if I did, because this was recorded a day after Finn announced that he and his wife are expecting a child. So that's where we start with the conversation, and then we go backwards from there. And interestingly enough, a little bit of music talk, but not as much as you might expect. But we get into some very interesting topics and stuff. Like, again, this is a very interesting one that I'm excited to share with you. And if you're listening to this on the Punk Rock MBA stream, I appreciate you taking a chance on my podcast. If you enjoyed this and are curious to listen to more, you can go to awesomedisaster.com. That's got links to everywhere that you can listen to my podcast, as well as all of my social media, my merch shop, and my Patreon. Everything that you can find related to me is at awesomedisaster.com. And I appreciate you checking out my chat here with Finn. And let's get into it now. Let's talk to Finn Mckenty of the Punk Rock MBA. Because I thought I knew how I was gonna start this interview. It was like, oh, he's almost at 100,000 subs on the second channel. That's pretty good. But kind of have to start with someone else. Congratulations to you and your wife, and that's really, really cool. I'm happy for you guys that you're gonna have a child.
Thank you very much. I'm pretty excited too.
That's awesome. And I really loved, like, because I watched your video on it today, and having followed your stuff for a while, and kind of this sort of like this arc of like personal growth that you talk about frequently on the second channel in your videos. I feel like this is the ultimate like full circle moment for you, as far as like overcoming any sort of like demons or adversity you might have had in your personal life early on. I feel like this is what that's all been building towards.
I hope so, unless I fuck it up.
You don't seem like you're going to. I think that you seem like the kind of guy who like takes takes care of and I don't know how you've always been, but you seem like the kind of person who like takes when something has to get done, like it'll get done.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I mean, I know it's going to be a lot of work and stuff, but I'm not worried about
That's
it.
good. Do you think you're going to be one of those dads that like puts their kid in like band onesies? Is that something you see in your future?
Fuck no. I hate that. That is the most I hate that. I hate when parents force their interests on their kids. It doesn't matter whether it's music or sports or I hate that shit. I will absolutely never do that. Anybody who knows me like in real life, I never talk about music at all ever
Uh-huh.
in real life. So I will absolutely not be trying to force that on my child.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you there. That way it becomes like that's like think of your child as more of like a fashion accessory for how cool
Yeah.
you are.
And I don't care at all what my kid is into as long as they're happy. Does not matter one bit to me.
Yeah, I think that's the healthy way to approach it for sure. The other thing I wanted to let you know is I really appreciated the hair metal video from this
Thank you.
week. I've been kind of like every time on Twitter that one comes up, I always kind of put that into the I always click that one, but it didn't look like it was going to happen. So I was excited to see that happen. Were you familiar with a lot of that music, that
Oh
bands
yeah,
that
of
you
course.
featured in that video, like the more obscure
Of
ones like
course, yeah.
Trickster and Jackal before making that?
Of course. I mean, there's more obscure ones than that I talked about, like Pretty Boy Floyd and Tough and Vain.
Yeah, I didn't know about Pretty Boy Floyd, but like being because I was a teenager the same time that VH1 was in their like let's count down everything ever phase.
Yeah.
So I was like catching that like top 40 hair bands of all time. So I would catch like uh that Trickster song on the regular and that
Mm-hmm.
or another big one. I don't I'm you might know them is that band Firehouse. Do you remember them at all?
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Um and
I mean, I was a teenager when that stuff was popular, so I remember all of it very
uh-huh.
well.
Right. So you were like so that you were like those are like I guess like kind of like prime memory building years when that was stuff
Mm-hmm.
was popular
Yeah,
for
I
you.
was like 12, 13.
Yeah. And did you like any of that stuff or did you like not like it at the
No.
time? No. Cuz I remember thinking it was like kind of ridiculous, but like you said in the video, like the core of all of that stuff that's popular is that the songs are always like really good and the musicianship is always like
Right.
really solid.
Yeah, I didn't like that stuff. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not like I would listen to it now either, but I can appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which the is the kind of like wisdom and that's the like kind of like wisdom and maturity that I think you get as a music fan when you're older to be able to say I I, I
Yeah.
appreciate that what that's going for. But
I think the reason why I'm able to talk about music the way that I do is that I don't really listen to music like for fun.
uh huh.
So it's work to me. So I'm able to talk about it. I don't have any emotional attachment to music. So it's not hard for me to be objective about it because I don't have, emotional feelings. To me, it's the same as if you ask me to analyze any other product, I mean, I worked on Febreze and Swiffer and stuff like that. I never bought a fucking and Bounce. I never bought a fabric softener in my life when I was working on that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I still did, I still worked on those products. And music is no different to me. I don't have emotional attachment to Bounce or Swiffer, but that doesn't mean, that doesn't get in the way of me talking about it from like an analyst perspective.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It just becomes like you're able to kind of separate from it, so that like,
Yeah.
which I imagine a good core of your viewers probably can't because it's like so much more of an like an
Right.
emotional thing for a lot of people, which is why people get like so like fired up about that stuff.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. It's very much personal identity for them, and it's not for me.
yeah. How do you being like now that your channel is at this at getting to this kind of level, and I know you're not like purposely like an inflammatory kind of YouTuber, which I appreciate about you, but like when you're like scrolling through, like when you have to like deal with like expressing an unpopular opinion, how do you compartmentalize that so it doesn't like bum you out?
Well, I mostly just don't express those unpopular opinions on my so for anybody listening who may not be familiar with me, I have two channels. One has been around for about 5 years and has 400,000 some subscribers. The other one is about a year old and has about 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
On the bigger channel, I don't really express my opinions at all. really. I just basically summarize Wikipedia. I realized that my audience basically just what they want from me is to validate their existing taste and opinions on music. So for the most part, that's what I do. I know what people think about this stuff, and like I just never say negative things really
Mm-hmm.
on the main channel because it makes people angry. And there's no real upside for me to make people angry. So I know what people want me to praise, and I praise it. On the other channel, it's a little bit more fun. I look at that as like a comedy channel more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I can get away with doing some kind of like roast comedy on there. People still sometimes get upset about it, but a lot less so. So to answer your question about how I compartmentalize it, I don't enjoy making people angry. It actually really, I find it extremely draining
Mm-hmm.
to deal with that. So I just kind of try to avoid expressing opinions that I know are going to make people upset.
Right. Just kind of like it's like there's no benefit to it. So why just
Yeah, there's no upside for me. It's just going to make people dislike me, and there's just no, yeah, there's no point.
yeah. Well, yeah, that to me, not only with like the personal like identity stuff, but also I feel like with YouTube and like this sort of like one way digital creator thing is like you're like people who view it, you develop that sort of like parasocial relationship where it's almost
Yeah,
like and I felt this way about podcasters in the past too, when I like really needed podcasts a lot more than I do now.
right.
You sort of develop this sort of like uh, emotion, like you can sometimes develop this kind of like one-sided relationship with a person who does not know you
Hmm.
exist, and then
And you know a lot about them.
oh, what's that?
And you know a lot about them, and you've heard them in your ears, for maybe hundreds of hours.
Yeah,
So it's a very odd relationship in that way.
yeah, absolutely. Like,
But I don't think it's limited to creators. I think it's true of just media in general right now. Basically, in order to have a viable media business, I'm sure there's a few exceptions, but not many. You essentially have to pick your audience and then tell them what they want to hear. And that's really the only way to have a viable business,
mm-hmm,
because there's no friction. There's so many options for media. There's no friction for your audience to just abandon you, and they'll do that if you tell them things they don't like too often. And so audience capture is, in my opinion, kind of the biggest issue for anybody that wants to make content. You look at the New York Times, for example, or well, let's say New York Times and Fox News, because it doesn't
mm-hmm.
matter. What if Fox News wanted to endorse a Democrat because they actually thought the Democrat was the better person for the job? Or what if the New York Times wanted to endorse a Republican because they felt that person was the best person for the job? They couldn't do it
No,
because the audience would turn on them. So if you are in the media business, which pretty much, I mean, almost everybody makes content now,
mm-hmm,
in business, you really need to be aware of audience capture. You essentially have to, what I would recommend is the first step is to identify what your audience is. Like at Procter and Gamble, they call it the ACB, accepted consumer belief. Identify what your audience believes, and basically understand that if you don't confirm those beliefs, you're taking a serious risk.
that's fascinating, but like completely true. I can't find anything
And it's
wrong with
super
that at all.
dysfunctional and bad, to be clear, but that's just how it is.
Yeah, yeah, I know, because I feel like because like those moments of friction. I was thinking about this because I've been thinking about like the personal growth side of what you do a lot, because I know I was going to be talking to you, but when you think about stuff, because like those moments of friction, and I think you've said this too, those moments of friction where you like kind of again have to like justify what you think or your thoughts, that's where like,
Yeah.
and then being challenged on that or like seeing something from a different way, that's where like personal growth happens. But in that model there's no room for that, because it's either like 100% one side, or you risk like not having, maybe not having like a definable product or a definable market.
People just get angry and say, fuck that guy. He used to be cool. I used to like his content. I'm out of here. And they're gone, you know?
Yeah, they're on to the next thing. So on that similar vein, like does Do you think that personal growth like that always has to be painful, and why do you think that it can be sometimes?
Personal growth, like what?
Like, I would say for example, say you're like really locked into a belief system or a pattern of thinking that's detrimental to your life or happiness or career growth, and then you get challenged by that. I think you said on LinkedIn this I something that really kind of blew my mind. The idea of like people just want to feel good while you're working with them,
Yeah.
and like you kind of you're saying you were pushing against that for a long time, before realizing it was true. Was coming to the realization that you were wrong, was that difficult, or did you just kind of like, oh, okay, and I'll just think that know this now?
Um, it's not difficult for me, but I understand that my brain is wired differently than almost everybody else's. For me, like if you were to think about it like an RPG, like a video game, if there's a slider between like idealism and realism,
Mm-hmm.
my slider is almost all the way towards realism.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I am inclined to just accept reality as it is, which has its pros and cons. There are, I would say, probably most people that I interact with have their slider way further on the idealism
Mm-hmm.
side. So I think that's how a lot of like creative type people. I wouldn't consider myself a creative person, but most people that I interact with are, and they tend to sort of operate in the idealism kind of world. And for those people, I think it's more painful to be wrong because the way their brain works is their model is like based on how the world should be. And when there's conflict between the way the world should be and the way it actually is, that's cognitive dissonance for them that causes, I think, emotional distress for them.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't cause me emotional distress because I just kind of shrug and go, all right, well, that's how it is, then okay. It might be sort of painful in the sense of like I may realize that I made a mistake that is going to take a lot of, work to undo. Like, oh shit, I've been operating under the idea that the world was like X for the past 5 years. It's actually Y. This is going to be rough. So in that sense, it might be like difficult, but I don't have emotional attachment to really, um, I don't want to say anything, but like, I mean, I obviously do to like people I care about and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, but like, I don't operate on ideology. You know what I mean? Like my fundamental like world model is that my opinions don't matter.
Uh-huh.
My world model is like I am my job is to perceive and react. You know what I mean? I don't have the ability
Uh-huh.
to like shape the world and I don't expect the world to adapt to my opinions or beliefs. It's the other way around.
Fascinating. And were you always like that, or did you have to come to that?
I've always been like this. Maybe I was born this way, or my dad was a corrections officer, and one of his jobs, or he got promoted later. He started out being, the guy that walks around in the tiers and searches cells and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But he got promoted to being a counselor later on in his career. And a counselor in prison is not like, oh, let's sit down and talk about your feelings. It's like, okay, you've got a parole hearing coming up in 6 months. If you want it to go well, you should take this anger management class and this job training program and make sure you don't get any infractions for blah blah blah. And sometimes those people are like, fuck you, you can't tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd be like, all right, well, do what you want. But if you want to get paroled, I would suggest that you do this. Um, so, and, he would talk about that a lot and stuff when I was a kid. So I think that probably maybe influence. That's my dad is just sort of that way of like, well, you don't have to like it, but this is the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And not in a harsh way, just sort of like, just is what it is, Um, so I've always been that way, whether it's nature or nurture. I don't know.
Right. Well, also, I feel like in that sort of environment, there's not a lot of room for the way it should be, because it's just this is the way it is
There's
right now.
zero room
Because
for it.
this is the way it is right now, and you can either continue to be in this situation, or you can take these steps, and then you will
Right.
be out of the situation.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Like these are the parameters, take it or leave it. That's just how it is.
Right. So like when you were so like I kind of want to trace this because you say you don't consider yourself a creative person, which I find interesting because I guess I figure making videos or even like making slam, which I know you do as well, is a certain inherently creative endeavor. Like when you were a kid, were you like super analytical, like, or if you weren't like a artistic or a creative child, or maybe you were.
I was into drawing and stuff, but and I mean, I'm not the least creative person in the world, but I've been around a lot of extremely creative, like brilliant people, and it's just super clear to me that my brain doesn't work the same way that theirs does.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the creative mindset, I think, is really fundamentally about rejecting restraints, and I'm just not like that. I'm too uptight for that. Like I started out my career as a graphic designer,
Uh-huh.
and it became kind of obvious to me after a while. Like when I was a designer at Abercrombie and Fitch, and I worked with everyone I worked with was fucking amazing at their job.
Yeah.
They were the most talented artists I have ever worked with anywhere, and it was very obvious to me after a couple months, like I do not have what these people have. Like
Sure.
they are better than me, and they always will be. And it's partly, I mean, they put in the work obviously, but like they're just naturally better at this than I am, and I'm naturally better at business than they are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I realize, I mean, it happened a little bit earlier, but that's when it became just like super clear to me that like I believe that people should play to their strengths, which may not always be what you wish they were, but I think for the most part, people are happier if they play to their strengths. And that's when I realized that, I have a much better analytical mind than a creative mind.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I can. I'm kind of picking up on that just in this time we've been talking. Um, and then you're into drawing, and then and you went to you said remember you went to college like later in life than usual.
Yeah, I was 25.
25. Okay, so you go through high school, and what was that like for you?
High
Yeah.
school, it was fun. I enjoyed high school. It was fine. Um, I was on debate team for 3 years. I took it like very seriously. I did like debate tournaments. I went to debate camp and stuff.
Oh, really?
And I would say that's probably one of the best things I ever did in my life, because that's really like boot camp for a creative thing, or for a critical thinking rather.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that was one of the most formative things I've ever done.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Do you remember any particular? I've never done debates, so I don't know if are there like tournaments and you like have to go argue a point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, did you always get to argue the point you believed, or did you ever have to argue against what you believed?
No, they flip a coin, so you have to be prepared to argue either side of it. So the way it works is every year there's different kinds of debate, but the kind that I did, they pick a topic every year. For example, when I was a senior in high school, the topic was resolve the United States should substantially change its foreign policy towards Mexico. And they'd flip a coin before the round, and you would have to either argue for or against the resolution based on the coin toss.
Oh, wow. And do you remember any of those particular ones, like which side you had to debate?
I mean, I did hundreds of rounds, so, probably 50
Uh-huh.
50.
Oh, wow. So like,
And you debate the same topic all year.
gotcha. Okay. And again, it's just because that's interesting. Because I imagine like, is there a sense of like objective right and wrong in debate, or is it just how you argue your side? And
It's completely based on how you argue your side. So I mean, it's a game. Um, it's a game. You're not, so you may be objectively, you may have a better idea, but you'll lose if you don't argue it well.
gotcha. And conversely, you could have like a terrible idea but argue it well and win.
Yes, it's usually that.
Right. No, I know I know exactly what you mean, and I think, and if I'm thinking like big picture stuff, I think some people with good ideas could learn to argue them better. Um,
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's interesting, and again, that's like, I'm trying to, um, I'm putting this into how like your like your career and then like what you're doing now, again, it's very much like there's this side, there's like this and this. I even maybe see like a little bit of that, like when you posit like a question at the end of a video, is like, you may think this because of this, but would you
Yeah.
also think that? That's really interesting. And then
Yeah, and there's a specific format to how you argue a debate round. There's like it's sort of loosely modeled after like a court trial.
mhm,
So the affirmative team presents their case, and then the negative team presents their case, and then you do cross-examine each other and blah blah blah. And then there's the very specific framework for each one of these speeches and pieces of the round, and all that stuff I think is a very very good framework for just persuasive argumentation in general, which I've used. I mean, like anytime I do a presentation, for my job or anything like
mhm.
that, it's really just using that fundamental kind of framework.
Interest, interesting. That's really interesting to me. And then so you,
Like, for example, one of the things that you have to establish is something called inherency, which is that there is an inherent problem with the status quo.
mhm,
Like, if you want to argue in favor of the resolution that the United States should substantially change its foreign policy towards Mexico, you have to establish inherency, which is that the status quo is not working.
right, because otherwise there's no argument to be
Exactly.
had.
There's no reason to change if everything's working.
Wild. That's that, because again, having like the idealist analytical, idealist kind of more creative free flowing mind. I was a theater kid, and and I've
Okay.
played bass in bands, so I'm sure you could
Yeah.
probably pinpoint a few things about me without having to know them.
Sure.
But I could see that being a situation where like uh I could see like being confronted and getting flustered very easily with like, no, you just don't get it. You're not seeing it.
Yeah, I mean that's something I've definitely had to work on over the years of not like it I mean it still does make me frustrated when people don't when I feel like people don't get it
Hmm.
or aren't trying to get it. That still frustrates me, but that's something I've really worked on a lot over the years of like not getting frustrated with the people when they don't catch on.
Hmm.
Like if I have to repeat a concept too many times because it's not sinking in, that irritates me.
Right.
Um, but it shouldn't. I mean, that's just part of life, and I can't expect other people to process things in the exact way and speed that I want them to be processed. Everyone's different, and so patience is something that's a weakness for me, and that's something I really try to work
Hmm.
on.
Yeah, I'm fortunate in that that's something I've always had like an over abundance of. So I've been able to put, when a lot of people would have like quit for their own well being, I'm still in slogging away at something, or like it was like, oh
I mean, patience with other
yeah,
people. Like, if I've explained something 3 times, I'm probably angry at that point, and I don't want to be because it's not helpful in any way.
totally. And what did you study in school?
For the first 3 years, I majored in graphic design, and then I kind of realized I still remember like when I was listening to a Tony Robbins talk, and I didn't even know who he was at the time. I just heard I heard somebody mention him. I don't remember who. Um, and I had sort of had some doubts in my mind about whether design was the right place for me, specifically because at the time I was working at an industrial design and engineering company, and so we were working with a lot of design projects and stuff, and it became obvious to me that the kind of problems that I wanted to solve and was good at solving were not really problems that design could solve.
Hmm.
Like basically, by the time you get to the design phase, the stuff I am interested in is already figured out.
Right.
Sort of like what is the potential like basically design is like the design process is what should we make, who should we make it for, and why. And then once those questions are answered, you give it to the designers to design the thing. I am more interested in answering those first three. Like I just trust the designers will do a good job, and not say that I don't care what it looks like, but that's not the part I'm interested in.
Hmm.
And that became obvious to me, and I was like, well, shit, but I'm 3 years into this program. Is this really the right place for me? Somebody told me about Tony Robbins. I don't remember who or why, but I was like, I downloaded it onto my iPod because
Mm-hmm.
this is the iPod
Yep.
days. Some random Tony Robbins MP3, and I was listening to it, and the talk he was doing was about don't major in minor things, and maybe halfway into the talk, it was just okay. I got to do this. I got to change out of this major.
Mm-hmm.
And so I switched to management and marketing, which is what I ended up getting a degree in.
Gotcha. And then that was so you're 3 years in, and then you switched to that, and then did you have to do like the another full four to get the marketing degree?
No, it was like a year and a half. So it ended up taking me 5 years.
Gotcha. And
But I feel like I got 2 degrees out of it because the design program I was in was fucking hard. The reason I went to the University of Cincinnati is because it's like one of the best design programs in the
mm-hmm.
country, and it's like very like old school like Swiss German kind of program, and it was fucking hard. So I got a lot out of that 3 years. I feel like I got like 5 years of design education in 3 years, and then I switched to business, and I learned a lot there too. So yeah, it took 5 years, and that was expensive, but I learned so much that I actually feel really good about how I did that.
Yeah, it sounds like a very like compacted amount of a great amount of information in a compacted amount of time. And this kind of like design program is like I imagine like less like art school confidential and more like practical applications for design.
I mean, there's a decent amount of art school confidential in there. I mean, that movie is very accurate, um, very accurate. So there's a decent amount of that artsy fartsy
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Um, but I mean, I can appreciate that too. It's just, I mean, like for example, I took like 4 quarters of like really intense art history, and I'm glad I did because I learned a lot from it, and I really like. I find, for example, like I didn't know that I really liked modernist painting, but it turns out that I do, and like I actually learned a lot from that, which I wasn't expecting to. So there's like the artsy fartsy side of it, um, but then there's a lot of practical stuff as well about like composition and whatnot, that sort of thing. And I'm glad I did all that stuff because even though I'm not a designer anymore, I work on a lot of things that involve design. So it enables me to, even though like having me in a design role now would not be a good idea because I'm just so rusty. I work with design a lot, and I'm able to be very effective at that because I went to school for it in part.
Yeah, and you can like speak that language like when you're talking to the actual designers, you kind of have that
Yes.
base level of understanding, which I think is
I
very
mean, it's more
very
than I
valuable.
did design for 10 years, so it's more than a base level. I mean, I wasn't, I was good at it. I just wasn't like exceptional. And I don't want to be good. I want to be really good.
To 100%. And this is also so if this is University of Cincinnati, so this is like during your peak of the like Cleveland chugga chugga scene.
No, after that, actually. I went to school there from 2004 to 2009.
Gotcha. Okay. So 2004, 2008. Man, I remember I was 2009. I was fresh out of college and was handling some personal stuff very poorly, but I'm glad I'm on the other side of it now.
Me too.
No, I know, and like I deep dive into all that second channel stuff. Like I was watching all of those early second channel videos because I went to school, learned all, for acting, like learned all the artistic stuff and like taught my and I play guitar too. Then I've had to come around and learn that and like okay, now I got to pick up the business side of this to figure that
Right.
all out. And punk rock MBA was right there for me right
Well,
when I needed it.
I appreciate that.
Of course, man. Of course, man. Okay, so just out of 2009, so you get out of school, and then what happens next?
I got a job at Abercrombie and Fitch, and so I moved to Columbus in I guess October of 2009, I think.
Okay,
So basically, like a month after I graduated.
gotcha. And so So working with Abercrombie, I've heard you speak to how talented everyone is. What was something really valuable that you learned working there?
To be honest, I didn't really learn that much working there, because I'd already worked with Procter and Gamble, which is basically a better company than Abercrombie,
Mm-hmm.
in every way. I mean, Abercrombie, like I still like have tremendous respect for like the designers there, but P&G, they basically invented consumer marketing as we know it. They're just so fucking good at it.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually kind of shocked at how not rigorous Abercrombie was by comparison. And having, worked around more like having learned what I know about the fashion industry now, I understand that that's just like the culture. Like
Mm-hmm.
they don't, they don't operate in a like P&G fundamentally is like a chemical engineering company.
Right.
So that's sort of their culture and DNA. And Abercrombie's a fashion company, and fashion people are not into like numbers, and they operate on emotion and intuition and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So I don't know that I learned that much there. Actually, I felt like I got dumber. I remember after working there, like I got a lot sharper working with P&G because everyone there was so smart and so analytical, and I found that just really like kind of energizing to work around. And I remember after a couple years at Abercrombie, it was like, dude, I'm getting dumber. Like, what is this sucks.
Uh-huh. So you're like, okay, time for a change of environment.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I wanted to work there is because I wanted a big name on my resume because,
Mm-hmm.
um, for better or for worse, that's just kind of what people respond to is seeing big names. So,
Mm-hmm.
I needed one on my resume, and I got it.
Yeah, I think about it the same way. Like a chef wants like a bunch of like James Beard Michelin star restaurants
Exactly.
on their resume so
Exactly.
that they can like go for the next job or like go to the next country,
Yep.
next job, stuff like that. Um,
Yep.
right on. And something I've been trying to one piece of the Finn McKenty lore I've been trying to piece out is when were you in New York?
I lived there for a year from 2002 to 2003.
2003. And did you live in New York City proper or did you live like New Jersey, Long Island?
I worked in Manhattan and I lived in New Jersey.
Gotcha. Oh, okay, okay. Um, I was trying to piece that part of the puzzle because I know you're like fuck this, and I totally know all the reasons
Yeah.
people say
Yeah.
fuck this to New
Yeah.
York.
Awesome place for people who aren't me. I grew up in the Seattle area, and New York is pretty much the polar opposite of Seattle. Like it's ugly, and everyone there is super aggressive, and that's just not me. You know what I mean? Like Seattle's a beautiful city, and people here are like, maybe chill to a fault.
Mm-hmm.
And New York just not for me. And I don't care about like if you want access to a lot of cultural things like cool restaurants and Broadway plays and the best bars and whatnot, like New York is great, but I don't care about any of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So for me, it's just it's a irritating place to live because like if you want to just go to Target, you can't. It's like, oh, you got to take 2 trains to Staten Island for that.
I Yeah, I know. Although in the ensuing years, Target has cemented much more of a foothold here.
I'm sure it's still like I don't want to like. And how do you buy a vacuum cleaner? How do you get it home? You got to put it in a fucking taxi or carry it. Like I just everything there is difficult, and that's an okay trade off if you really value all the cultural
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Then you're willing to put up with the difficulty of buying a vacuum cleaner because you're like, yeah, but I can go to this restaurant and this museum in the same day. I'm like, cool. I just want to go to Panera. uh, so it's not for me. Like I think New York City is an awesome place, but it's not for
Oh
me.
no, I totally get it. I've carved out my like little nook here that that brings me joy. But I've definitely have those days like especially like
Right.
in the pandemic where it's like it's like okay, I guess I can't wear my headphones on the subway for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. And the crazy part is that Seattle now is not really very much cheaper than New York.
I know. And you know what surprised me recently? I saw a thing on Twitter ranking like the highest rents in cities. Um,
Yeah.
Boston was number 2. That surprised
I've
me.
never been to Boston, but I always see it on those lists too. I've never been there, so I don't know.
Well, I've spending some time there. I've definitely spent some time in some kind of like nice and definitely touristy neighborhoods. I imagine it's like kind of like any city, like or what always starts like it's a place is cheap to live for a while, and then it becomes cool, and then it's expensive to live in.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I don't know if Seattle is cool so much. It's just we have so many tech jobs where people make a lot of money that it drives all the costs up.
right. I've never been to see Seattle, so I couldn't say I've been. It's been on my list for a while because my uh
I think it's the most beautiful city in America.
oh yeah, like I've seen uh like once you take those ferries like north, and once you get into the
Yeah,
woods, that stuff like all that stuff that looks like it's out of Skyrim, I think you said, it's like that looks
totally.
spectacular. Or I just spent like a good chunk of time in California for the first time this year, and
Hmm.
just drove the coast with my wife, and I was just like, oh man, you're really tempting me with your with this with West Coast lifestyle, United States.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Works for me at least.
Absolutely, man. It's all like you got to find like what like the space where you can thrive. You know. And when did you? What were you doing when you got the idea to start the first YouTube channel?
Uh, well, basically, I figured if I'm going to tell the world that I am good at marketing, that I'm good at my job, and I understand social media and stuff, I've done it for other people, but I should do it for myself as just a way to prove that I'm good at my job. Because I was thinking there are exceptions to this, but generally speaking, I think it's kind of weird when I see people who say that they are great at social media and content marketing and stuff, but they have no following of their own. I understand that it's not quite as simple as that because there are people who maybe just don't want to do it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I did it, to just prove that I'm good at my job. And at the time, I would have been happy of like if I just get like 10,000 people reliably watching my videos, I'd be happy with that.
Mm-hmm. So the YouTube channel is almost like, in a way, another resume builder. The same way you've
Yes,
got those big names for other jobs, and then you're like, oh, and I can do it for myself. You've never heard of me, but these people have.
exactly,
And then
exactly.
and then for it to be music, and then to the focus on music is because that's just what you had experience in, and what you knew.
Yeah, well, I originally, like you saw some of those original second channel videos. I originally started out talking about business because that's sort of what I'm most interested in. And that's the kind of content that I was making at my previous company, Creative Live. I was doing a lot of
Mm-hmm.
making a lot of business content for our CEO's social media. And so I kind of started out doing that sort of stuff, but nobody gave a shit.
Mm-hmm.
So I started talking about music because that's something I obviously know about. And that got traction pretty quickly. And so, here we are.
Yeah, because I can't think of too many other like and granted I wasn't very deep in like the music area of YouTube. I think the algorithm throws me weird stuff. Like it throws me
Yeah.
you on a lot, obviously because I subscribe, but then it'll also give me like, hey, here's like cave diving accidents YouTube, and true and like true
I watch a lot of that kind of
uh-huh.
stuff.
Do you know like Mr. Ballin? He's like a true crime YouTuber.
I don't watch too much true crime, so I'm not familiar with
He's
him.
a very good storyteller, but like he also tells a bunch of stuff of like, oh, there's this cave in Florida, and like this they went in and they were never seen again, like kind of those
Okay.
kinds of stories. So I find that kind of weird stuff the algorithm throws me. But I remember like what was interesting to me about your channel when I first started watching it. First off, the name I thought was cool, so I was like, oh, because to me, punk rock has always been synonymous for DIY. So I was like, oh, it's the
Yeah.
do-it-yourself MBA. Okay, maybe And I think
Right.
the remember, and I don't even know.
That was exactly my intent with it. And then I realized later that nobody actually knows what an MBA is. So it was lost on them.
Mm.
But that was my actual goal with the title.
Well, at least one person got it, Finn.
There we go.
I was hip to what you were going for, and especially because the first video watch, and I haven't been able to find this recently, so I don't even know if it's still live. But you did How'd They Get So Big about Slipknot, and I was like, oh, okay.
Roadrunner blocked that
Ah.
one, so it no longer exists.
That'll do it. But I remember thinking that I was like, oh, maybe I'll learn something, and then I was like, oh, if I ever play in a band again, maybe I'll remember some of these things and work on being charismatic. The other thing I love that you do is that you kind of harp on, and I think about this with comedy too, is all this extra stuff that goes into being a musician and getting people to your shows that musicians are like, we shouldn't have to do this, and you're just kind of well,
right.
You have to now. That's just the world,
Yes.
the world we live in. You gotta do it. I feel that way about, especially like traditionalist comedians. Like, there's a lot of anger about TikTok amongst lots of comedians. I know, but then also, like, the product is like, okay, you have no idea unless you've seen me on YouTube. You have no idea what kind of comedian I am, but come spend money to see me anyway. So my roundabout question is, if you could just like collectively like grab the shoulders of like everybody in a band or anybody who's like a creative who's like doing something creative, but they don't understand this side of it, you could just collectively grab the shoulders and like, listen to me, what would you say?
Gosh, where do I even start? I would say, change everything about the way you think about everything.
I mean, that's something that I have definitely done on a few things because of your channel. Because I never take anything you say if I don't agree with it as a personal attack. I'm like, okay, well, let's see what he's got. Maybe I'll change.
I mean, fundamentally, in all seriousness, I think the challenge for almost all creators is like, as you said, it's everything aside from the craft of the thing that they do. So if you're a graphic designer or photographer, or you make videos, or you're a musician, like, getting better at the craft is the part you enjoy. So like, you don't need to focus more on that for the most part. Most people are already doing that because they like it and they're getting better. The part that most people are frustrated with is getting attention for it. Like we were talking about earlier, people want or believe that they, should be getting more attention for this. And so, if you're spending 95% of your energy on creating and only spending 5% of your energy on, getting attention for it, well, you can't really be surprised that you aren't getting attention, because it's not the way the world works that, someone is just going to discover your brilliance and, throw a bunch of money at you to do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to put yourself out there. And the good news is that it's so much easier to put yourself out there now than it ever was because of things like TikTok.
Right.
That you can be discovered without really having to put much real work into it. At least not compared to how you used to have to do it. So if I could shake them and sort of make one switch flip in their head, it would be for them to look at promotion as not like a necessary evil, but just another part of being a creator.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of I have to do this, like, I get to do this. So like, making TikToks is like, that should be a fun creative outlet as a comedian. Like, I mean, and I consider myself a bit of a comedian sometimes.
No, absolutely.
What you want to do is reach people with things that make them laugh. And I don't care whether that happens in person or on YouTube or TikTok or, Twitter or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to make people laugh.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people maybe put a lot of Ramit, this guy Ramit Sethi, he's a personal finance guy. He has a term that I like a lot: invisible scripts. And a lot of the creative people create these invisible scripts for themselves that paint them into a corner, like that. These sort of beliefs, unstated beliefs, like I only enjoy comedy in this one particular narrow set of circumstances, such as, being booked as in the top 3 people on stage at this set of venues in these cities. It's like, well, you've really kind of painted yourself into a corner here, because those just aren't opportunities for you right now. So maybe instead you should just like maybe reorient your thinking a bit to be like, hey, I just like making people laugh, and if I can do that on TikTok, great.
Yeah, because there's no barrier to anyone stopping you from being on TikTok, for sure.
No, and even if you don't necessarily, if you're not passionate about TikTok, you can at least you gotta find the wherewithal to do it anyway, because I mean, it's just a fact that you could make some TikTok in literally 10 seconds when you're in line at the grocery store that could reach 10 million people in a day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the potential upside of TikTok is so huge compared to the investment. Like, I don't understand why musicians or comedians, or like a lot of people, really over-index on doing things in person.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if I was a musician, why would I spend 3 weeks on tour playing to like these shows to 20 people as a way to build my audience, when I could spend minutes or hours on my couch reaching 100 times more people on TikTok?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, there's a lot of these sort of invisible scripts that people have that I think really hold them back.
Yeah, I love that phrase, like, because you build up this sort of like you build up this narrative, and again, you build this narrative of the way you think it should be, that it is kind
Yeah,
of in contradiction with how it actually works, and
right. And that's when you get
mhm.
frustrated, because you are pounding your head against the wall saying, well, I shouldn't have to do this, or people should act this way, or people should consume my art in this way. But that's not how it is. And,
Mhm.
that's what creates friction.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of artists are very frustrated people because there's that cognitive dissonance.
Sure. And that also plays into there's like a sense of entitlement to that I would imagine
Yes.
those same folks would probably, if they saw that in someone else in another situation, they would disdain that behavior. So it's somehow it
Right.
gets, there's a pass on that.
And I'm guilty of it too, by the way. I think I've made a lot of progress on it, but it used to really frustrate me that there were certain things that I wanted to make videos about that my audience doesn't give a shit about, or dislikes or whatever, and it used to really frustrate me. I mean, I guess it still does a little
Hmm.
bit, but it took a long time for me to sort of let go of that, and let go of my own entitlement and ego that people should care what I have to say about this or that. Well, they don't.
Hmm.
People want to hear me talk about other things, and so what the script that I rewrote for myself is to say, I'm grateful that anyone gives a shit that I have what I have to say about anything at all. I'm not going to be precious. I'm not going to let my own ego ruin this and say that and be angry that people want me to talk, like, for example, hair metal. That's not a topic I necessarily have a ton of passion for.
Hmm.
I mean, because like I'm generally more interested in like new things. My audience is generally interested in old things.
Hmm.
And that really frustrated me for a while. But now it's just like, well, look, you got to give the people what they want. And
Yeah.
if people want to hear me talk about music that they liked in high school, then I'm going to do it. And I'm grateful for it. Like, you can't, it's just, it's so arrogant to be angry to be angry that people appreciate the wrong thing is just so arrogant.
Yeah. It's like having the hit song and then you're mad that the people like the song.
It's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is. Like, look, just be grateful that anyone wants to hear you play anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I've had that exact conversation with myself, that I'm mad, like, well, I want to make a video about X, but my audience wants me to make a video about Slipknot and hair metal, two things I don't give a shit about. But that's what people want.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, well, I always shake my head when there's bands that won't play the hit. And there are some,
Mm-hmm.
that it's like, it's notorious they won't play the hit song. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? Just get up there and play the fucking song.
I know.
And then I realized, oh, I'm being that person.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's that balance of like making yourself happy, but then also again, if you have an audience of anybody who's interested in what you do, you want to make them happy too. And I do, and I do
Exactly.
feel that there is value in that, for sure.
I'm happy when the people are happy. That's how I look at it now.
Hmm.
If I make content people enjoy, then I'm happy.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. And again, like flipping the internals script on that, that's like not every. I don't know if everybody would be able to do that. So I commend you, and I aspire to your adulting, Finn.
Well, I don't think it's, I mean, maybe it's adulting, whatever, but to me, it's just my mom was in AA and a bunch of other 12
Hmm.
step programs and stuff. And so being around that stuff a lot when I was a kid, I really learned a lot about denial when I was a
Yeah.
kid. And I think that's at the root of a lot of these things, is like denial. That's that's essentially, when people won't accept reality. That's denial.
Yep.
Like, for me, like, I had to admit the fact that I am just naturally not that great of a, like, I mean, I'm a good designer, but I'm not a great
Right.
designer, you know? And there was a while where that was a bit of a blow to the ego. Um, but you got a choice. You can either face facts and make the most of it, or you can continue to be in denial. And as long as you stay in denial, things are not going to get better. Like, there's zero situations where continuing to stay in denial was helpful.
Exactly. It's like I am in denial that I am trapped in this tank that is slowly filling with water.
Right. Well, okay.
It's just like, all right, enjoy.
If you say so, if you say you're not drowning, I guess you're not.
Right. Yeah, like when you phrase it like that, it's kind of silly. I agree with you. Letting go of a lot of stuff that I held very very dearly. Like again, like the genre stuff that people always get upset with you about.
Yeah.
Like letting go of all that stuff, or like, just like watching Below Deck with my wife has been very freeing. It's made me a much.
Was that good? I've been trying to get my wife to watch it.
I really like it, and I do not like reality TV. So I think if she likes like Real Housewives,
She loves reality TV.
then I have no idea why she would not be into this. It is people on big boats in beautiful settings doing crazy things, and then everybody makes out and cries with each other at the end of.
So is it like the Real World or Real Housewives type thing, but on a boat?
Kinda like you follow the crew of each of these boats, and you get to learn the crew, like the crew and what they are into, and these clients and their like crazy demands, and then you get invested in
Hmm.
each other's career growth, and then there's the captains who are always like, uh different personalities. Like there's Captain Lee on the original Below Deck, who's like so over everything, and he's like, I'm fed up with all of
Okay.
you. Then there's Captain Sandy on Below Deck Med, who's like very with it because she's got a lot to prove, so she's very cool to watch. And then there's Below Deck, Down Under, where the captain is a kind of a pushover and is also famous in the industry for crashing a yacht. So, and
Oh, would you recommend one to start with?
I mean, I think you could start any of them, but if I was gonna say one, I think you could start with the original because Captain Lee is kind of a
Okay.
curmudgeon in an entertaining way.
Okay.
So that's what I would recommend to you. And I also, if you guys aren't watching Summer House or Winter House, I like that one as well.
we did watch the first 7 or 8 episodes of Summer House, but it was a little bit too. There wasn't as much character development as I wanted,
Uh-huh.
um, and it felt like the parts in New York kind of didn't matter.
Yeah, they're
You know
kind
what I
of
mean?
throwaways when they go back to their jobs in the city.
Yeah, I wanted a little bit more. I mean, it was okay, um, but it didn't quite grab us in the first
Mm-hmm.
season. We also watched what's the one that's in South Carolina?
Southern Charm.
Um, yeah. We watched a little. So I'm really fascinated. I've never been to like the South really, other than like
Mm-hmm.
Kentucky, um, and so I'm like fascinated. Being from Seattle, the exact opposite of the
Right.
South, I'm fascinated by just getting a window into like how like these douchey people in the South
Uh-huh.
live, you know, and like them boasting about their families being here in the 1600s. And it's like, well, all right, then that means they were either colonists or like slave owners or both.
Yes.
Which-
Absolutely they were. And you look at these houses and they're like straight up former plantations.
yes, exactly. And it's never crosses their mind that that would be awkward.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting. I think I liked that one a little bit more than my wife did. And Summer House was interesting because that's like a peek into that like New England, you know, East Coast WASP kind of lifestyle, which, you know, those kind of people just don't exist on the West
Mm-hmm.
Coast. Certainly not in Seattle, but just not in the West Coast in general. So I didn't have any idea that any of that stuff existed really until I worked at Abercrombie,
Uh-huh.
because that's the lifestyle that Abercrombie at the time was based on. Now they've gone woke and they're trying to
Sure.
like, you know, paper over their past sins by, you know, pretending to be, you know,
It's
super
super
woke
inclusive.
and
Yeah, I
progressive,
saw that
which,
documentary. I
yeah.
know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I have some issues with that documentary, but it's mostly it's more accurate than not.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't get Mike Jeffries in there, and I would have really. It's what's odd about Mike. I was in hundreds of meetings with him. I saw him multiple times a day. I saw him at the gym in the morning, and then in a lunch meeting, and then at eat. Like I saw him all the time. Uh, super weird. But he is a really really nice
Mm-hmm.
person, and the quotes that are attributed to him in the press, just I can't imagine those words coming out of his mouth. Um, he's never denied them, but I'm just like, who? I'm so confused by this, and I would have really liked to get his side of that whole thing, but of course I understand why
Mm-hmm.
he didn't want to be part of it. But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. I also would have liked just I don't know, sort of. It's unrelated to the point of the documentary, so I understand why they didn't talk about it. But I do think that they nobody has made better garments at any price point than Abercrombie did at their peak when I was
Mm-hmm.
there, like from like 2008 to 2012 or so. Nobody on the planet made better shit than they did at any price point. You go pick up a $500 Gucci hoodie, and it's not as nice as an $80 Abercrombie hoodie from
Mm-hmm.
2009. And I would have liked to see the brand get a little bit more credit for that at least, but it was interesting.
Yeah. Uh, I I I'm 6'7" and I've always been kind of on the heavier side,
Oh,
so I've
okay.
never been able to shop at the mall.
Yeah, no.
Um,
Well, yeah,
um,
that's tough.
yes, but I'll take your word for it on that one. But yes, coming around like below deck, definitely worth the watch. So if one thing comes out of the show, if I can get you and your wife to check out below deck, I'll be happy about that.
I'll suggest it to her. I want to say one thing. This is totally
Of course.
irrelevant, but about the Abercrombie sizing thing, which they left out of the show. People forget that brand is for teenagers.
Yes.
Like people would like adults would complain that the sizes are too small for them. Like 14-year-olds are very small humans.
Yes. Very much so.
There's no reason why it should fit an adult. And like for example, they caught some flack because they like didn't have extra larges. That's not because and I remember asking about this,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, yeah, that's like 1.5% of sales. We stopped making extra larges because like it just doesn't make financial sense. There was no conspiracy to like keep out, larger people from the brand that just literally didn't sell. Like the majority, like 80% of sales were like small and medium.
Right. I feel that I think I remember reading something like that about band merch as well. Cause I remember in the group one time I was trying to like, hey, you should have like 3X. And people were like, that doesn't really sell as much. And I was like, okay, so I always appreciate when it's available, but then I was like, I should probably work out a bit more.
Which sucks for you, but at the same time, you can't expect people to like, buy into those sizes if it just doesn't sell.
Yeah, if it's not profitable, it's a business decision.
But I see you're wearing one of my shirts, and I did make sure to pick. There's different shirts that they offer on Teespring, and I did make sure to pick the ones with the largest range of sizes because I know how frustrating that is for people.
Well, I appreciate that, and when I was
so I'm glad you could find one.
I did, and you can see it is well worn and well loved. I'll probably
it is. It looks great.
I'll probably pick up another one in the not too distant future. I also want to thank you because I didn't know about Teespring until I watched your video about it, and I like fixed up so that's how I do podcast merch. That's how I do band merch.
Did I make a video about it?
You did. You were talking about your optimizing your Teespring store to try to get more sales.
Oh, okay.
And then I was like, oh, you can just upload the photo and you don't have to I don't have to have 50 shirts sitting in my apartment.
Yeah, it's great.
So I really dug that. Oh man, I feel like I should have started with reality TV. We could have had a whole another hour.
Oh, I could talk about it for hours.
Well, if this was enjoyable and you ever wanted to come back and just talk about reality TV, I am all for that, Finn.
Oh, I could definitely do that.
Well, perfect. Let me ask you one more thing before we get out here, because I know we haven't talked about music too much, but I would love to ask you if there's a full length album, because I know you're more of a singles guy. If there's a full length album you've listened to recently that you really liked, and any style.
Yes. I will tell you. Yes, it is "Subject to Change" by Kelsea Ballerini. She is a pop country artist, more on the pop side than the country side, but it's fantastic.
Subject to Change by Kelsea
Ballerini. It's got a blue cover. She's wearing like a yellow dress on it.
Excellent. I will make sure to check that out because I really enjoyed that song "Famous Friends." I think you talked about.
Oh, it's great. I love that one by Kane Brown and forget the other guy.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, but I loved that song. I was like, this song is a banger.
It's a great song and really nice lyrics. I really appreciate that one. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you saw the video for it, but there's a line where he is talking about his friend who won Teacher of the Year. And I'm pretty sure that is his actual friend because she looks like a very normal person and she seems very uncomfortable to be on camera.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that really is her. And I think that's really cool. That's like one of my favorite songs of the past like 5 years for that reason.
Yeah, I really liked.
It's nice to see normal people celebrated.
100%, absolutely. She reminded me of because my mom was an elementary school teacher, and I spent like a ton of my childhood being really well behaved around a lot of teachers.
Right.
And so she reminded me of I was like, oh, she could have been my like third grade teacher or my fourth grade teacher. So I really liked that as well. And this is the one other thought I would love to toss your way just to hear what you think about it. I feel like country and punk, and maybe to an extent pop country and pop punk, could be better friends than they currently are, because there's lots of pop country about having drinks and hanging out with your friends. There's lots of pop punk songs about hanging out with your friends. So I feel like we could reach across the aisle here, and there could be some like Alex Melton and that whole y'alternative thing he does. I feel like there's an opportunity to make something really cool by combining those two.
Yeah, well, you'd think so, but unfortunately, rock fans are kind of ignorant and classist. And so the narrative, it's kind of ironic considering that a lot of rock people feel like they're so unfairly stereotyped or maligned by normal people who think that they listen to satanic music or something like that,
Right.
and they get so upset that they're misunderstood. But they do the same thing to country fans, or they think that anything for country, it's kind of it's uncomfortable to see that anytime you bring up country, they start calling people white trash and bringing out all these
Mm-hmm.
like classist narratives about how this is just stuff for rednecks about drinking beer and you know partying with their truck and blah blah blah, trotting out all these like just really honestly ignorant, like rude, mean stereotypes. So um yeah, that's gonna be the problem there, is you're gonna have to get over the kind of ignorant rock fans.
I know. That's my idealist brain getting crazy. The
I would love it. I mean, I find it strange that people are so uptight about music, because at the end of the day, musicians are all the same type of person.
Mm-hmm.
The people who make pop and death metal and country are fundamentally this wired the same.
Yes.
These are not different people.
Yeah, exactly. There's a type that wants to like create and perform and release music
Right.
regardless of styles. And there are like there's like serious metal people that will say they like pop, and it'll cause their fans to freak out. And then there's pop people that I know listen and like metal and
Tons of
like
them.
metal as well.
But it only goes one way. Like, pop musicians don't judge you for listening to metal, but metal musicians will judge you for listening to pop. So the tolerance only goes one way.
I agree. And if there's one thing I can impart to anyone who does do that, let it go and you will be so much happier in your everyday life.
Yes.
Um,
Stop caring so much about what other people like. It's really not that big of a deal.
100%. The one sliver of hope that I did see in that is, did you listen to any of the newest State Champs album?
Yes.
That song "Act Like That" with the guy Mitchell, with that guest vocal by Mitchell Tenpenny. That's like my favorite song of the year. I really, really liked that song a lot.
I heard it when it came out. I haven't listened to it again. I'll have to give it another shot. I did like it. That album.
Yeah,
is great.
I really liked that album too. And then the video for that is like they're holding like basically like a field day Olympics, and when that guy, and they're like jumping dirt bikes in the back while they're playing in their like Letterman jackets, and then when he comes in
right
in camo and does this killer guest vocal, I was like, holy shit, who is this guy? I gotta look up more of his stuff. His solo stuff's very, very good too. If you're into country, you might want to check that out also.
Yeah, I'll take a look. Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like there's something there. I mean, there's tons of kids who grew up, in parts of the country where, country is the dominant form of music, that ended up getting into alternative stuff too, that are into both. Like, and it's not a small number of people; it's millions. I feel like it just needs like one kind of breakout star to put it over, and then it could be something. I think there's definitely something there.
Absolutely. And then that really charismatic person to bring everybody together and be like, this is great. This is great. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, here's to hoping that we get that moment, Finn. Is there anything else we can plug before we get out here?
No, I appreciate you having me, and I'm happy to come talk about reality TV anytime. I could do it all day long.
Awesome. Well, don't think that I won't ask you to do that. Maybe I'll get.
Please do.
I'll give it a little bit of time, but I absolutely will. Thank you again, Finn. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I appreciate it.
No problem. Talk to you later.
I could not have planned to talk about the stuff that we ended up talking about, and that's what I love about podcasting is things like that happened. That was incredibly insightful conversation with Finn, and I feel like that's the kind of chat that I have not heard him do very often, but I enjoyed that immensely. I have a lot of stuff to think about, and I look forward to Finn's eventual return to this podcast, in which we can discuss every spin-off of Below Deck on Bravo, and the pros and cons and benefits of each one. If you followed my stand-up recently, I had an interesting encounter with someone from Below Deck. So thank you guys again so much for checking out this podcast. I tremendously appreciate it. And thank you, Finn, for taking time to chat with me. If you enjoyed this and think you know a friend that would be interested in this podcast as well, you can go to awesomedisaster.com. That has links to all of my social media. I am on Instagram at willcarry23, at Comic Will Carry on Twitter. And you can also find links to everywhere you can get the podcast: Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. You can give us a follow on any of those platforms. And if you are on Apple Podcasts, if you want to leave us a 5-star rating and review, that helps other people find the show as well. I tremendously appreciated it. And if I can plug myself briefly for a second while I plug myself, I just released my first solo acoustic EP, Death of Sincerity, which is available everywhere you stream your music as well. And if you want to support the show a little bit further, you can go to our merch shop, or as well as our Patreon, which is patreon.com/awesomedisaster. And you can check out some exclusive things I have available there, as well as some cool t-shirts as well. And I look forward to hearing from any punk rock MBA fans in the future. So thank you very much again for listening. Have an excellent Thanksgiving if you're listening to this closer to that. And be well these holidays. I will see you next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, get vaxxed and boosted, and stomp out fascism. Take care, everybody.